Good evening from the south of Israel. This is Laser Brody with part four of The Merchant and the Pauper, one of Rebbe Nachman's compelling tales. And Baruch Hashem, tonight, at first, as we customarily do, we're going to review parts one, two, and three. So in case this is your first time with us, you'll be right on board, right on the page. And then we'll continue with Rebbe Nachman's classic tale, which it hints at the frustrating efforts of the true Mashiach to reveal himself, but promise in the end, it's all going to be good. Okay, so in part one, we learned about a great merchant of impeccable character and wisdom, and his wealth transcends continents. This is indicative of the tzaddik of the generation of Moshe Rabbeinu, that his wealth transcends. What's his wealth? His knowledge, his spiritual wealth, and influences the whole world. But even though he's so fantastic, he's got so great character, and he's charitable, he's got one problem. He and his wife do not have children. Okay, now the merchant had a neighbor who was very poor, a pauper, and the pauper was very bitter from years of poverty. But unlike many poor people that despite the fact they have no money, they have wonderful character, the pauper didn't have a very noble spirit. He was poor in spirit as well. And his wife, in contrast to him, she was very good, wonderful character, wonderful muse, we say. And they had also the same problem as the merchant and his wife. They didn't have children. Well, the merchant, gives charity freely, and to this poor couple that were his neighbors, he'd give them charity all the time. And one time that they had a dream, that the merchant had a dream that all his riches were being taken away from him and given to the pauper's wife. And the pauper's wife, she had a dream that she was receiving all those riches. We'll see soon what happens with that dream. Okay, so one day, the merchant's wife, she invited the pauper's wife out on an outing with some other women. They went in a horse-drawn carriage. So while they were out on the road enjoying the fresh air in the countryside, some soldiers came, the general soldiers came, and they stopped the carriage, and they right away honed in on the pauper's wife, who was a beautiful woman, and they didn't pay attention to the other women. They said, oh, this one would be perfect for the general. So they abducted her. So she became captured, and she was taken to the general. Well, the pauper found out that his wife was abducted. He was beside himself. He cried. He hit his head against the wall. He said, that's all I have in life. I don't have any money. I don't have anything. And now my wife is being taken from me. I have nothing. Well, the pauper's wife, when she's taken, she's a very pure woman, very innocent woman. The pauper's wife, she is Rebbe Nachman's metaphor for the general populace of Israel, the good people, that they don't have much money, but they are very impeccable character. The pauper himself he is indicative of the nations of the world. We'll see the nations of the world that they don't want to hear about Torah. They don't want to learn about the good character of Torah, that is charitable. And the thing. So they're juxtaposed. This is what Rebbe Nachman is telling us, that the pauper and his wife is just like in this world. This is the poor world of spirituality. They're poor, but yet the Jewish people are together with the nations of the world, and they should be influencing one another. Okay, but nations of the world are not influenced. So meanwhile, the merchant, who is the tzaddik of the generation, we don't learn much about the merchant's wife, but learn about the merchant. Just like the Torah, we know all about Moses. We don't know much about Zipporah. We know all about the tzaddikim. We do know one thing. People ask, well, what is the Torah chauvinistic? Why doesn't the Torah speak about the wives of the tzaddikim? Why don't we know the names of the wives of all the 12 tribes? Well, one thing is intrinsic in the Torah, and we see this in chapter 31 of Proverbs, Eshes Chayil, that a person cannot be a tzaddik, arise to greatness, if he doesn't have a strong woman behind him, a good upright woman behind him. So we see everyone sees the fuselage of the airplane, but few people see the engine. That airplane doesn't get off the tarmac on itself. It depends on the engine. And this is why Rebbe Nachman on purpose doesn't mention too much about not at all, about the merchant's wife, except the fact that she was childless. But Rebbe Nachman does in his own writings, when Rebbe Nachman lost his first wife, his world crumbled, because he did everything he gave credit to his wife. Okay, so now in a daring mission, the merchant, he can't stand to see the pain of the pauper. And this is the true tzaddik. It's just like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he couldn't stand to see a nation in pain. And he helped everyone. He helped everyone, but the Jews, non-Jews, he didn't care. And Lubavitcher Rebbe, and also Rebbe Nachman before him, they were the ones that so encouraged to spread goodness, spread the light to all of mankind, be light unto the nations, and that's the light of Emunah. And this is why the Lubavitcher Rebbe encouraged so much about teaching the Noahide laws to our non-Jewish brothers and sisters. Okay, so here the merchant, we see in his character, he can't stand to see the pauper in pain. So what does he do? He takes his life in his hand and he does a daring rescue mission, just like a commando mission. He goes right in to the soldiers' camp, right past the general. The people are so stunned, and the guards are so stunned because of his confidence. This is emunah, his bitochen, his trust in Hashem. And he goes right to the room where the pauper's wife is captured, and he takes her. He takes her, and he says, so, come, we're going. He wakes her up, and he takes her, and they go. Well, we could see that they're all stunned. They're immobilized completely, like they're frozen. They're frozen. This is from Hashem, and Hashem made them freeze. But once this is Pharaoh, when Moses took the Jewish people out of Egypt, but once they left Egypt, Pharaoh woke up. What do I do? What do I do? And he started chasing them, then chasing them to the Red Sea. This the same thing happens right here, that the soldiers wake up, the general wakes up, and they say, what's going on here? And they started chasing him. They chased him all over. Well, the merchant and the pauper's wife, they hid in a cistern, a rain pool, or like a reservoir that gathers rainwater. And they waited for 2 days till the chase was over. Then they left. Then they started chasing again. They went to another hiding place. They went to 7 hiding places. Now, each one of these hiding places, this is allegoric to the upper worlds. I don't go into the Kabbalah, but Rebbe Nachman, it's very, very deep. Rebbe Nachman's tales are layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. What we are trying to do in this lesson is in all our lessons on Rebbe Nachman's tales is to learn more or less the pshat, the general meaning, and what Rebbe Nachman's allegory is, but not go into the deep Kabbalists. Kabbalists learn these. Then they go into the deep secrets of Rebbe Nachman, who was an unbelievable, fantastic Kabbalist. So was his great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov. But we're not going to go into this. What we're doing, this is all an allegory about the difficulty of coming a Mashiach, as we'll soon see. Okay, so they hide in one place, they hide in another place, they hide in 7 places of kosher bodies of water. First is a cistern, and then in a mikveh, and then in a wellspring, and then in a creek, and then in a lake, and then in a river, and finally in the sea. 7 bodies of water. These 7 bodies of water refer to the upper waters, the 7 horizons, the 7 above the physical earth that take us up to the heavenly throne. Okay, so every place now, even though they were alone, and the merchant is very handsome, and the pauper's wife, she's a beautiful woman, they don't touch one another. They're hidden all alone. They're in solitary. They're hiding all alone, but they are both maintain such virtue, and they're faithful to Hashem, and they're faithful to the commandments. They don't commit adultery, even though they could, and nobody would know about it but Hashem, of course. And they fear of Hashem. This is the real fear of Hashem, where somebody, their place where no one can see them, they refuse to sin. So for their dedication, for the bravery and dedication of the merchant, and for the virtue and the purity of the pauper's wife, when they get back home, they are rewarded. They are rewarded. So the merchant and his wife give birth to a son, and the pauper and his wife give birth to a daughter. Okay, now, as this daughter grows up, she is phenomenally beautiful. Her reputation begins to fill the whole world. People say, but there's this beautiful girl in the kingdom, the pauper's daughter, and people say, what are they talking about? So they come and see this girl, and she's so beautiful. And as she becomes a teen, she's even more radiantly beautiful. And finally, she's in her mid-teens or late teens, the noble one. They all want that for the daughter, but there's a problem. There's a problem. They're blue bloods, and how can they make a match with a poor family? So they can't do that. But meanwhile, when they were hiding, the merchant and the pauper's wife, they were in these 7 hiding places, 7 places of kosher water, And the pauper's wife was amazed that the merchant would risk his own life to save her. And every time was risking his life again to go to another place and risking his life again. Every time they were in this place of kosher water, well, Rebbe Nachman was still kosher water because they're like a kosher witness. Witness in a religious court has to be a kosher, upright witness. It can't be someone that was a violator of Torah, person that violates Torah. If this person no violator of Torah, he's not acceptable witness. So these kosher bodies of water acceptable witness. So the pauper's wife swore to the merchant, wherever she was, she says, whatever I have in good in life, you're going to be partner to. You're going to be partner. Right. So when they came back and she remembered her oath in every one of these places. She gave 7 oaths in 7 different places and 7 bodies of water. The 7 oaths, after they give birth to their children, and they remember the dream. The pauper's wife remembers her dream that she's receiving all these goods from all the riches of the merchant. The merchant had this dream that was upsetting, that he's giving away all his possessions, all his money to the pauper and his wife. But then decide, hey, we can make a good solution to the dream. Let us betroth your son and my daughter, says the proposes the pauper's wife. Okay, we'll make a match for them. When they grow up, they'll get married, and then they'll have all our possessions. And the way we share that. This is a wonderful idea. And they both virtuous. The pauper's wife was very virtuous, and the merchant, his wife were virtuous. Of course, right away they decide to do that. So they made this harmonious match. And as we see as the tale unfolds, we can see that the merchant's daughter, this beautiful daughter, the radiant, beautiful daughter, the pauper's daughter, she is a metaphor for the divine presence, where the merchant's son is a metaphor for the true Mashiach, the true Mashiach. So the divine presence and the true Mashiach are trying to get together, because once the divine presence gets together with the true Mashiach, he can no longer concealed. He's revealed, and then that's the Geula. That's the full redemption. That's the full redemption of the world. So this, all along, we'll see the different powers of evil, the different powers of evil creation that will do everything in the world to stop this. Okay, so the reputation of the pauper's daughter for her beauty, it goes so far and wide that all these noblemen begin coming to the capital city where they lived to see the pauper's daughter, and they all want her, but they can't. But once again, they're blue bloods and he's not. So they get together, noblemen, and said, listen, let's do a plan, let's cooperate. So one of us will benefit. Okay, but if we don't cooperate, none of us are going to benefit. So they get together, they cooperate, and they say, let's give the pauper a commission, bring him into the armed forces, and work up the ranks. They give him a commission, and he becomes a lieutenant in the Navy, becomes a junior officer, and he has amazing success. He goes into the Navy, he has amazing success. Everything he does is successful. And everything he just goes up through the ranks, goes up the ranks, and he wins all his battles wherever he goes up the ranks, where he finally receives the rank of admiral or general. He's at the top rank, and he continues winning all his wars. What's Rebbe Nachman telling us here? That now the pauper, who is the new general, okay, the general once pauper, why is he succeeding? He's succeeding because of his upright wife. So here we have the nations of the world that they receive the reins of the world, they're commanding the world. But why are they succeeding? They're succeeding because they are benevolent to the Jewish people. Whenever we see a nation that persecuted the Jewish people, nation became backward. Take for example, Spain, the Spanish Inquisition. Spain is the most backward country in Europe. All Europe is way ahead, but Spain's Spanish Inquisition expelled the Jews, and they became to be like a Middle Age. You could still go to the south of Spain and see people plowing with cultivating with oxen and with mules. It's amazing that it's the 21st century, but that's Spain. Okay, so we see that the pauper's daughter, she's demanded by everybody, and they all want him. So now that the general, the once pauper, he's now a general in the army. He's got different status. His social status is different. So now they're all seeking him. But hold it. This is the dukes and the earls and the royalty is seeking. Behold, then the kings start finding out about the princess. That she's not yet the princess. She's the general's daughter, once the pauper's daughter. And now the kings want her. But the kings can't have, they could be married to general. They have to be another king. A king marries a family of another royal family. So now the kings all decide that he has to be raised some way. And just then, from Hashem's divine direction, the emperor dies. So the kings get together and they take the general who's already captured all the enemy countries. He's now controls a big empire. And they decide to make him, instead of general, they upgrade him to emperor. He becomes the emperor. Okay. So now that he is emperor, and all these kings are running after him to make a match with him. He says, well, what do I need this poor merchant for? I could be married to a king. He forgets who, this is what the Torah says about Pharaoh. And Pharaoh forgot what Joseph did for him because of Joseph. Joseph saved him from the famine, and Joseph saved the land of Egypt. But once things were a fat city again, forgot Joseph. And then that's when he turned the Jews into slaves. Okay, once again, here we see the same thing. Rebbe Nachman uses imagery from Torah. He uses the tale from Torah, the episodes of Torah, and he applies them as principles in his tales. So we see once again the ingratitude. We'll see again the ingratitude that continues the story, the ingratitude of the nations, and they're ingrates. So now the new emperor, the nouveau riche emperor, once pauper, then general, now emperor, he says, what do I need the merchant for? He doesn't care about his vows. He doesn't care about the merchant. He doesn't care about his wife's vows. Okay, he wants to be status, and he wants to marry off his daughter to one of the kings. That he should be his daughter should be a queen in one of the kingdoms, and he be married together with a king. We say in Yiddish, a machitten. He should be intermarried with a king. Newly appointed emperor wants to cancel all his wife's vows and marry off the princess. Now she's a princess, and marry off the princess to one of the kings. We begin part 2 with the emperor realizing that as long as the merchant's son is alive, he can't do that. So he makes plans to eliminate the merchant's son. He sets up false charges. He frames him false charges, and he calls the judges into session. The judges try him, and the judges, of course, understood this is what the emperor wants. There's no justice. They say, well, what does the emperor want? And they do, like monkeys, they emulate the emperor, and they do his will. It doesn't matter what's true, what's not true, what's just, what's not just. So the empress, she could do nothing against the emperor. They condemn the merchant's son to death at sea, and they're going to put him to a sack and tie the sack to cinder blocks and throw him overboard and pull him right down until he drowns at sea. Well, the emperor's wife, the former Pauper's wife, the emperor's wife, she can't confront her husband face to face, and she can't go to him with power, head to head. So she went to the executors and she pleaded with them. And everybody loved the empress. Everybody loved them. But the empress did only good things for everyone. Everybody loved her. And so she pleaded, she begged with the captors. She begged with the jailers, the captors. And she says, don't you have somebody convicted, a convicted criminal that's going to get the death sentence anyway? And you could tie him in a bag and throw him overboard instead of the merchant's son. Well, they took pity on her. They agreed. And they released the merchant's son, and instead they took a convicted criminal, and they tied him to the sack, put the cinder block on, and threw him into the sea. But meanwhile, before the young man fled the jail, they let him out, they let him escape, he received a letter from the princess. Because meanwhile, her mother, the empress, told her the whole story about how the merchant saved her life, how they hid in 7 places. She told her exactly all the 7 places, the cistern and the mikveh and the stream and the river and the lake and the sea, exactly where they were and where they hid, and how in every place she made an oath to the merchant that she would betroth her daughter to his son, that they would match. And she told daughter, listen, no matter what is offered to you, the merchant's son, is your betrothed groom. That's my oath. An oath is something holy. One of the worst transgressions of Torah, Ten Commandments, is to cancel an oath. And that's even the third way, not to take Hashem's name in vain. An oath made by Hashem's name. It's when a person swears by Hashem's name. That is enriched uranium. That is a nuclear bomb and can light up a city or it can destroy a city. And this is the way she made that oath. She made that oath. She says, I made a solemn oath. A solemn oath means that she involved the name of Hashem in her oath, and that you must never, ever marry anyone else. Anyone else. This is your groom, and he's your intended. So the daughter, she accepted her mother's words because she too was a God-fearing young lady, just like her mother was. And she promised to remain faithful at all costs to the merchant's son. So she sent him a letter while he was in prison to the merchant's son that she was going to be loyal to him and she'll wait for him, the true groom. And she sent him a map. She drew in her own hands. She drew a map of the 7 places where they hid together, where her mother and his father hid together. And these are the 7 witnesses. Once again, the sister and the mikveh, the spring, the lake, the river, and the sea. And she implored him, whatever you do, guard this note carefully because it's my own signature, my own handwriting. And no matter what happens to either one of us, this will always be proof that you're genuine. Okay, so don't change one letter. This is allegoric of the Torah. Allegoric of the Torah, that wouldn't it for a false prophet or a false Messiah always changes something in the Torah. And that shows that they're false. And this is what the Rambam, Maimonides, teaches us, that if someone changes one letter in the Torah, it's already false. What the Melitzer Rebbe always says, 99% truth is 100% lie. So we could see all these different false messiahs from within and from without. They all make changes. What's it, the whole New Testament? What's the New Testament? That's change. And taking the Sabbath and turning it from Shabbat, Saturday, into Sunday. All these changes, and people don't realize that as soon as you make a change in Hashem's word that He gave to Moses, is that. What's the difference between that and all these other up and coming prophecies? Well, Moses was on Mount Sinai with 2 million witnesses that we have generation to generation that heard Hashem reveal himself on Mount Sinai. And in all the other places, you have one person that saw the light. And when he saw the light, and he's got a whole new doctrine, and he makes this whole new thing. This is false. This is another one of the layers of allegory of the false Messiah, and why our lives are so difficult because of all the falsehood in the world. Why is the falsehood in the world? That as soon as we deviate Torah, as soon as we deviate truth, truth is Hashem's name. I'll explain the truth is one of Hashem's name, emes, and it comes from the numerical value of I am that I am, and numerical value in Hebrew comes out to truth. And this is what the Gemara tells us. This is Hashem's signet ring. Hashem's signet ring is truth. So the moment we have the slightest deviation of truth, it's not 100% truth anymore. Okay, so now the merchant's son escapes, and he goes out to the sea. He catches a ship, and he boards out to sail. Now, he knows, since he's the merchant's son, and his father was an international trader and knows all the seas, well, the merchant, his son went, but he went out to sea, and he had a destination, but Hashem had something else in mind. A big storm wind came, and almost destroyed the ship and blew it to a desolate coast. And the young man, he went deep in the wilderness in search of food. He was one of the sole survivors. And at one point, he wanted to turn back, but it was useless. The ship was broken anyway, and he didn't remember his way back to the coast. He was deep inside. Well, as he went deeper into the wilderness, he had bow and arrows with him, and that's he protected himself. What's the bow and arrow? The imagery of the bow and arrow is an uncle. It's the bow and everywhere in the Torah, the bow and arrow, it says with Jacob. Jacob said that he captured Shechem with his bow and arrow. Wait a second, Jacob. Your sons, Levi and Shimon, they captured Shechem with a bow and arrow. Onkelos, he translates this in Aramaic that with his prayers, Lo Saibo said, my prayers and my requests, the bow and arrow. Every time we see bow and arrow, this in Torah, this is an indication of a request. Because when you shoot an arrow, you want to hit the bullseye. And our prayer, it is a proverb, it's a aphorism for prayer, because when we shoot the arrow, we're going to hit the bullseye. That means when we send up our prayers, we're going to send them up powerfully that they hit the heavenly throne. Okay, so now he doesn't remember his way back to the coast, and he doesn't have any hope of a ship. Where there's no ship. There's just broken boards from the ship. There's nothing left. He came ashore with grabbing some board. So he just goes deeper into the wilderness, and he kept walking till he found something to eat. Well, finally, he arrived at a lovely uninhabited clearing with a water spring and fruit trees. Wait a second, he's got something to drink, he's got something to eat, and he didn't have to hunt for food anymore because he's got all these beautiful fruit trees, he's got date trees and banana trees and papaya trees and wonderful fruit trees. And this was a beautiful, peaceful, and isolated place. So he decided, what do I need the strife of the town that they sentence me falsely and they try to kill me and people chasing me? This is a good place to stay. I am going to stay here for the rest of my life. Live alone, live peaceful, talk to Hashem. And who knows if I'm ever going to find a better place than this. So he does. We'll see that he takes wood from the wilderness, and he makes his own instruments, and he plays Hashem. What's Rebbe Nachman telling us? Rebbe Nachman had a dream. And this dream was like the dream of King David. King David said in Psalms, Mi tenli evel kiyona aufana veshkona. King David, one time, that the strife in the capital city with his enemies from without, enemies from within, and the people plotting, his closest advisors plotting against him, and all this intrigue. And all King David wanted to do was to serve Hashem. Fight enemies, all taken with all the evil inclination, agents of evil, trying to take away the service of Hashem. Rebbe Nachman says, if only I had the wing of a dove, that I could fly off into the wilderness and be on my own. And so this is the merchant's son. This is his wish, because the merchant's son, he's the Mashiach, he's the anointed. This is King David was Mashiach, the anointed. And this is what he dreams. Now he dreams, he says, if I have a dream place, who needs all the strife in the capital city? I'm just going to stay here for the rest of my life, be peaceful. This is just one peace of mind. This is something because of, in every generation, the tzaddik of the generation that could be, our sages tell us in every generation, there is the soul of Mashiach, but it can't reveal itself because the people are not yet worth it. They're not yet worthy. If they're not worthy, then it goes. But it could have been. It could have been. You see, when the people in Chabad say, there are some people that the Rebbe was Mashiach, don't argue with it. Maybe they're possible. I don't know. But it could be, because every generation there's someone that was Mashiach. Okay, so here we see, and the Mashiach, he's got all this resistance. He would just love peace of mind. All he wants to do is serve Hashem. He wants to serve Hashem, fighting all these wars, even though Rebbe Nachman tells us in Likutei Moran, in the second Torah, that Mashiach fights his wars by way of prayer. That's his bow. In this end, we see this imagery. All the way, Rebbe Nachman used to, all his writings, have very similar imagery. Okay, so what he's now, and he's got this life of nirvana. This life, he's eating his bananas and eating his coconut and his dates, and he's got nuts. And he's playing his lyre and his flute that he made by himself. And think this is a good life. Just live a good life. I'll live forever like this. This is indicative of what Jacob wanted to live peacefully. Jacob said, "Now let me live peacefully in my old age." Right away, when Jacob said, "Let me live peacefully," Joseph was abducted by his brothers. And Joseph was sent down to Egypt. And then Jacob had 22 years of anguish. Well, this is the same thing that happens to the merchant's son, Mashiach. Right away, when he thinks he's at the coast of tranquility, he's living a life of peace, all of a sudden a hurricane comes. And what happens with this hurricane? Right before the hurricane, the merchant's son decided he had this letter from the princess, from the empress's daughter, and he read it every day. She told him to guard it carefully, otherwise nobody's going to know who you are for real. You guard it carefully, guard it carefully. This is an allegory for guarding our Torah. Guard it carefully. Okay, so what he did was afraid that something would happen to it. So he dug a hole in a tree and he made a marking exactly which tree it was. And he put the letter inside the tree for safekeeping. He says, every time comes that I go back to the capital city or have a chance to meet it, I'll know what the letter is. But meanwhile, I don't have to forget. I won't forget it anywhere. I know where it is. So he made himself where the tree is, and he made marks on the tree, and the particular tree that the letter was hidden, and this was hidden inside the tree. So we see where is the Torah come from? Where's the source? Inside the tree of life. The tree of life, that's Hashem. Tree of life. So it comes along a hurricane of forces of evil. And the hurricane knocks down all the trees in the island. Thousands and thousands of trees. Well, the merchant son, he looks, he's beside himself. How is he going to find that letter within these thousands of broken trees? And he, at first, in panic, he started looking. He opened every day. He'd open up a few trees, but he wouldn't find it. And every day when he couldn't find the letter, he cried and he cried and he cried. So he finally, after a couple of months of this, of crying day after day, he collected his thoughts. This is something Rebbe Nachman says in all his tales, where the hero, the tzaddik, vayishev et atzmo, and he collects his thoughts. He composes himself. What's that mean to compose himself? That he did self-assessment. He did Hibodedut. He did personal prayer. Rebbe Nachman talks about this all the time in every one of his prayers. This is so very important that we all speak to Hashem in our own words every single day. And that's the main part of Emunah. Emunah is not, you wouldn't call it faith. I call Emunah your own personal relationship with Hashem. That's the difference between Emunah and religion. Emunah is not religion. Emunah is faith. Faith, your own personal relationship with Hashem. And that's why we speak to Hashem every day. We spill our hearts out to Hashem, and this brings us closer to Hashem. And as we bring us closer to Hashem, the more we love Hashem. The more we love Hashem, the more we want to do Hashem's will. So the merchant son says, if I continue like this, I'm going to go crazy. He's beside himself in grief. This is something else Rebbe Nachman shows within Likutei Moran. Rebbe Nachman says that if you go to the source of mental illness, and you go to the source of extreme neuroses that turn into psychoses, it all stems from a lack of emunah. It sounds a bold statement. A lot of people argue with it. We stop and think, this is what Rebbe Nachman is telling us here. A man says, if I continue to be sad like this, I'm going to be insane. Sadness is, so he does, why? Because he hasn't accepted this. This is accepted, he didn't do this, he didn't do anything wrong. This came from Hashem. So he says, I have to leave here. If I see here and every day, and I see these broken trees, all right, so Hashem doesn't want me to have the letter, and he had to just leave his haven. He thought his haven would be there forever. No, but had surprises. So he gathered provisions into a sack, and he left, and he went along until deep into the continent. He found a settled area, and he asked the people, he said, what land is this? And they told him, and he said, they have a king here? They said, yes. Well, have you ever heard about the emperor? And they said, yes. Have you heard about the emperor's beautiful daughter? And they said, oh, yes. And they answered it, but no one could be matched with her, as we already know, because she only has one person in her mind, and she doesn't want to listen to anybody else. That brings us to the end of part 2. We now go to part 3. In part 3 that we learned last week, the merchant's son decided that he can't return to the kingdom. So he'd go to the king of the local country that he happened upon, and he told the king that it's a princess's intended groom, and because of him, she doesn't want any other match. And since he cannot get there, he would give this king all the signs he has. Let the king go there. Let the king marry her, and do favor, because the signs, you enjoy it, you marry this beautiful woman, and just give me a monetary reward, and I'll just go back off on my own in the wilderness and live myself. All right, so he asked for, he gave him the secrets. He gave him the 7 places. And every place for a person to be interviewed by the king's daughter to see if this suppressed the match, he had to compose a song. And both she and the merchant's son They grew up together, learning music and singing together, and they continued each on their own, lovers of music, then lovers of prayer, singing to Hashem. And we see that the princess does this all the time. The princess, that she's the divine presence, singing to her child Hashem. And the merchant's son, he does this all the time. This is what Mashiach does. So the king heard about it. He said, story is too far-fetched to be invented. It's got to be true. So he wrote down the signs and he composed a poem. He composed a song to sing to the king. But he didn't want to bring the princess. He knew that she'd accept him as her match. He didn't want to bring her back to the kingdom as long as the young man was still there, because she might find out who he really is. So he exiled him. And this is his ingratitude. Rather than giving the young man a monetary reward, he exiles him 200 miles deeper into the country. Okay, so the merchant's son was very upset, being once again exiled instead of rewarded. And this King Solomon again tells the prophet, it's the person that rewards a kindness for something cruel. This is the epitome of ingratitude. So now he found another kingdom. He went to another king. But then he said, decide, he'd give the king, the second king, even better signs than he'd give the first king. So he told the second king, hurry up, go to the palace. This time he gave the second king the 7 places in order. The first king didn't know them in order. He knew the 7 places. Well, when the second king decided that it was also not good for the young man to stay in the kingdom if he succeeds in bringing back the princess, so he again exiled him. So now he's exiled for a second time. So again, once again upset. So he went to a third king. Same thing happened all over. But this time to the third king, he told him the 7 places, told him in order, and he took out his own piece of paper and an own pencil, and he drew a map that he remembered from memory from the princess's map. Meanwhile, the first king arrives at the emperor at the emperor's palace, and he requests an audience with the princess, and she's on a podium behind a curtain, and he's on a podium. He sings to her, and this is the first time he sings to her a song where she hears the 7 places. She says, "Why, this must be my real one." She thought nobody could possibly know this, but my real intended. So he said the pit, he said everything. So she thought that this was her match. But meanwhile, the second one comes, and the second one, he gives another beautiful song, but he says it in order. I says, well, this one's better than the first one, so he must be. Meanwhile, the third one comes, and the third one races to the kingdom, and he gives her the signs and in order, and with a map too, but it's not her handwritten map. So she is so confused. There was a premature celebration. They thought that she found her match, but now with the second king coming and the third king coming, she didn't know what to do. She was baffled, and she saw that the third map, even though it looked true, it was counterfeit because it wasn't her handwriting. Suddenly confused. So finally she said that she would no longer believe anyone until they come with her original note. So meanwhile, the young man decided, the merchant's son, that he's out in the wilderness after being exiled 3 times, that he himself would try to reach the palace to try and convince the princess who he really was. So he made it to the palace. He knew his way, and he made it to a port and navigate the sea to get back to the palace. He made it to the palace, and he requested audience with the princess, and he had better signs. He had things that no one could possibly do. The 3 kings didn't know. He didn't tell them. He told them about the songs they used to sing when they were little children together, and they were growing up, and they learned together in school, and how they play together, and how they sing together, and the words of the song, and their harmony. And he told her everything. But she ignored. She was already brokenhearted. She said, well, do you have the letter? No, I don't have the letter. Okay, another one trying to convince me. But she couldn't recognize him because so many years had passed. And meanwhile, she didn't remember him. So he was unsuccessful in his attempt to convince her. So the young merchant's son decided that he can't hang around the capital city, the palace, because meanwhile, the emperor might find out who he is, that he wasn't executed, and come back and try and execute him. So he said the best place to do is to get a ship, go back to the wilderness, the coastal wilderness, and go back to his haven and there he would live out his life. Meanwhile, many years passed. So on the sea, there was a pirate A pirate was a ruthless murderer, and he heard that such a beautiful princess exists. Now, he wanted her for his greed because he not didn't want her physically. He was a eunuch and he didn't have the wherewithal, but he wanted to capture her and sell her to a king for a very, very high price. So the murderous pirate made a scheme. He took a big pirate ship, he took his big ship, and he put it full of war goods from all over, from Japan, from India, other places in the Far East, all over with fine silks and fine spices and gold and silver. And he did something even more. He did something special that he made these golden birds, and because they were like puppets, they could be run on the strings that you couldn't see, and it would look like they would sing and flap their wings because he had a very good one of his sailors was a good ventriloquist. So one of the sailors was a ventriloquist, would chirp and sing instead of the birds. It looked like the birds was doing that. He was standing behind like a ventriloquist does with his puppets. Another one of the sailors was a good puppeteer. So he had one pulling the strings and one in the voice. What does this tell us? This is indicative of the sound and light show that the evil inclination did. When Moses didn't come back from Mount Sinai, the evil inclination did a sound and light show showing as if Moses was taking a pier up to heaven that he died. And this right then, the people thought that Moses had died and then what's going to do, and they made the golden calf. And when the evil inclination convinces of these falsehoods, they convince people of falsehoods, then they fall really deep and they go in the golden calf. So the golden birds are indicative of the golden calf. Okay, so this was all a trick. So now the pirate, he sailed off to the king, he sailed off the kingdom, to the emperor's land, and he pretended to be this distinguished merchant and importer, and people would go buy expensive things from him. And he docked at the port for 3 months to establish his credibility so that the people would get used to him. So eventually the emperor's daughter heard about this guy with the fancy foreign thing that was fit for a princess, and she sent to the merchant, let him come and show me his wares. We sent back, he's a rich merchant. He says, I don't make house calls. If someone wants to see my wares, they have to come to the ship. So he lured her into the ship. But meanwhile, he was very clever and very cunning, this pirate. This clever and cunning, this is the evil inclination himself. What we call this is Esau's angel. What in Kabbalah we call the Samach Mem. That's Samael. That's the name of the evil inclination. That's the name of the angel. Okay, so patient. He's patient. Have to understand that the evil inclination is very patient. It decides to trip somebody else. It does a salami. You take a salami, you take a thin slice, and then another thin slice, another thin slice. What looks like he's not doing anything, but before long, there's no salami left. That's called the salami trick of the evil inclination. So he lures her to ship once, then twice. And he says to her, if you come back, I'll even show you nicer wares than I'd show anybody. Not even the governor's daughter or the duke's daughter. No, this is only for king's daughters, for emperor's daughters. So he finds this fine silk, and all the time he lures her and lures her. And finally says to her, I've got inside this room, I've got these golden birds that can sing, and they, she said, I can't believe it. And she says, so he gives her a little peek and shuts the door. And she says, I want to go in there. And she, of course, can't go in there because every time she would come to the ship with a bodyguard and with these, her maid servants that would be with her. But he says to the bodyguard and maidservants, he says that you can't. The empress daughter, that the princess, she wants to see these, but I can't let you come in because nobody else can come in here. So they went outside the ship, and he took her inside the room, and she saw this extraordinary novelty. And like the other people that were with her formerly, they couldn't go into the room, and because he only wanted to show it to her. So she alone entered in there, and she was alone with him in the room. And then he locked the door, and he did something crude. He forcefully threw her into a sack. We said again, thrown into the sack. This is what her father did to the merchant's son. So now the evil inclination is doing it to her, the pirate, the murderous pirate. That ended her thing. Now we're in part 4. Okay, we're on a new part 4. So what he did, he made her take off all her clothes, and he dressed her as a sailor, and he veiled her face, and she pushed him out and said, go. And the sailor, not knowing what, he took the princess's clothes and dressed one of his sailors and pushed him out. And they thought this was the empress, the empress's daughter. They thought there was a princess. So the guard and the escorts, they took the sailor dressed up as the princess and took him back to the castle. By the time they went to the palace, and they saw, oh, she went and took off the veil. It's not the princess. It's some stupid sailor. So they knocked the daylights out of the sailor. But meanwhile, the princess isn't there. Okay, so what he did, he took the murderous pirate, took the princess and dressed her up in the sailor's clothes, tied up her hair, and now she's disguised as a sailor. And right away, he pulled up anchor and they sailed away. So they're off, and they're already in the middle of the sea. So they're certainly sure they'd be chased after. So what he did is, again, before they went to sea, they had to hide in a pit because people came to the ship and they were certain they're going to find him. And they searched the ship. He wasn't there anymore. The pirate took the merchant's daughter, took the empress, took the king, the emperor's daughter, the former Pauper emperor, took the emperor's daughter, and he hid with her in a cistern. And they looked for him some more, and then he went and he hid with her in a mikveh. And he hid with her in the same 7 places that her mother hid with the father. Okay, so right away, they told the ship sailors in the meanwhile to cut anchor, and they went out to sea. And they went. The ship would. They the ship would not be to shoot at, and they told them they chased after the ship, but they couldn't find anything. Meanwhile, he went to another port and he sailed with her on another ship. So he says, you have to know something. He says, my life is worth nothing. I risked my life in order to capture you, and my life is nothing to me anyway. It's only the money that I could get for you. So don't scream wherever we go. Don't scream, because right away I'll kill you. This is the threat of the evil inclination. It's to know that what the evil inclination threatens us going to be. That's not going to happen. Why? Because if he kills her, he doesn't have any money. He doesn't have anything. Okay, so what did he do? So he departed with her. She was so terrified by him, and she was afraid to scream that somebody finds. So he departed, and he brought her to a city, and they traveled on until they came to a place where the murderer understand that they're not searching anymore. And in time, he made it also to the sea, and they got on a ship. They found a ship, and he took the emperor's daughter. And like I said, he didn't do anything to her because he was a eunuch. He had no desire at all, no urge. He just wanted to sell her. And they went to sea also. So while they were at sea, a storm wind comes and destroys their ship. And their ship gets washed up to shore. And the shore is broken. And nobody else, the only survivors are the empress's daughter, the imitation sailor, she looks like a sailor, and the pirate. So they came there, and the pirate, he knew his way around, but he had no longer any reason to guard it. It was a deserted island, or so it looked. And she distanced himself from her. Little by little, she went away from him, and he began to shout out to her, to look for her, and she made up her mind not to respond to his shouts. No, she's not going to reveal where she is. And she says, if he tries and reaches me again, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear him. Okay, so as he doesn't want to kill me, he wants to sell me. Now she reassured herself. She reassures himself because now she's connected with Hashem. So once she connects with Hashem and she's on her own, and now she what Rebbe Nachman says, miyashevet atzma, she composes herself. That's what she does in her self-assessment, personal prayer. She composes herself. And now she says, he can't do a thing to me. He can't do a thing to me. This is what Rebbe Nachman is teaching us, that when we compose ourselves, when we hold on with Emunah, if we fear one, we fear no one. That no one could do anything to us, no force of evil against Hashem's will. Once we cling to Hashem, if we fear Hashem, then we don't have to fear anybody on earth. And this is what's happening with the princess right now. She doesn't fear him anymore. She's not afraid of him. And she goes further. He couldn't find her. And finally, vicious animals find the pirate, and vicious animals tear him apart. They eat him apart. So there's no more pirate. And she goes further and further and further until she's able to find some food. And she came to the place where the young man was living. Here they come. This is nice, the unknown reunion, the unknown encounter. She comes to the place where the merchant's son is. And by the time he was overgrown with hair and beard. She had also had grown her long hair, not her princess's haircut. And she had these disheveled sailor clothes. And from all the tribulations of being at sea and being in the wilderness, she looked like a man. So he asked her, "Where did you come from?" She says, "I was a merchant on the sea." And she asked him, "Well, where did you come from?" And he said, "Was also a merchant." And that's where the two of them remained. So meanwhile, the emperor's daughter, as she was snatched away, as mentioned, and when she was snatched away, the empress was beside herself, and she started yelling at her husband, the emperor, "Because of you and because of your pride, and you broke a promise, and we lost our daughter, we lost everything, and the wasted young man, you would to kill him, you would kill him, and not only did kill him, and she didn't tell her that he escaped, but killed him, and now we lost our daughter and our entire fortune. Those children were our entire fortune, and now what are we left?" She says, "I've got nothing left. I don't need you. I've got nothing left." Meanwhile, the emperor is losing all his wars, one after another, and he became very bitter. Not only was very bitter, his wife was on. She was on him day and night. Day and night. "It's all because of you." And they had severe quarrels, and they were bickering all the time. And she was angered very much. And he finally ordered that they banish the empress. Okay, the judges sat on trial, and they ruled that she be banished, and she was banished. But afterwards, the emperor sent out to war, and he wasn't successful. The emperor lost the war. And they said that the people in the country said, "You know why you lost the war? Because you banished the empress." So what they did, mida keneged mida, measure for measure, he banished the empress, so the people banished him. So we could see this is that any nation that ever banishes the Jews, they have a downfall. They get banished themselves, banished from history, banished from society. So again, after another unsuccessful battle, he first tried to banish generals, but in the end, he got banished. And the citizens recalled the empress, and everybody loved her. And they said, "She be empress." So as soon as she was empress, she sent for the merchant and his wife. And the merchant, he was also exiled because the king didn't want him. And the king thought that he executed the merchant's son. He exiled the merchant and his wife. And he tried to make them paupers. So he exiled them. So then the emperor, while he was set in exile, he went and begged that those that were leading him released him. And they had pity on him, and they released him too. Okay, released him. We're going to hold up here with part 4, go on to part 5. I don't know if we're going to be able to finish next time because I'd like to review. So everybody knows the whole story right now. But we are now, in fact, we're on this wilderness, called the desert island wilderness, and the princess who's dressed up as a sailor, disguised as a sailor, and it's a divine presence. People don't recognize a divine presence. And the merchant's son, who is Mashiach, and nobody recognizes him, they don't even recognize one another. Now, her father, the king, is now about to be banished from the kingdom. Her mother becomes empress. He's going to be banished. So this is, we're going to pick it up next week. And now the action really starts. It picks up the volume of action. So B'ezrat Hashem, next week we'll pick this up with part 5 right here of the merchant and the pauper. And meanwhile, have a wonderful week, and we should all hear good news from one another.